Hey guys, it's your girl Aisha, K Geek X Chic, and we are here with another review to The Walking Dead. This is for episode 18, which is called A New Deal. And the deal has definitely changed in so many ways for the Commonwealth after this episode. A lot of things kind of went down. I think talking about the deal itself, Carol trying to go a little bit more of a diplomatic route, basically seeing an opportunity in Pamela's son being in a world of trouble, and the fact that Pamela is still very much stuck in the old world mentality of thinking that reputation is everything. And that is somewhat true in the Commonwealth, but not really. I mean, this democracy is very much an illusion in the Commonwealth. These people don't really have a lot of power. It's really coming down to who everyone listens to. And at the moment, that very much is Pamela. But we're going to get into the whole concept of how the Commonwealth is working later on. But anyhow, Carol saw that opportunity and realized she could maybe broker a deal for herself and the other Alexandrians to guarantee their safety for those who chose to leave. And basically, it entitled them to continue rebuilding Alexandria, which was something that the Commonwealth was already doing, but of course it was being done with the caveat of them basically making it a part of the Commonwealth. But basically they would be able to go back if they wanted to go back. Oceanside would be released, and basically no one would end up harmed, and in return they would blame everything that her son did on Hornsby, which was 50% true. Some of the stuff was Hornsby, but a lot of it obviously was Pamela's son abusing his power. But anyhow, Pamela thought this was a good deal because she had turned a blind eye to a lot of what Hornsby was doing, and she knew he was up to no good, and this was a good way in her mind to kind of clean up that mess and save her precious legacy. But as we saw, her son is just not that guy. You know, he's unfortunately one of those very stereotypical entitled rich brats. He's had his life handed to him, and he doesn't really appreciate what he has, and he doesn't feel like he should have to. And he also recognizes that he's not the kind of person who should have power to be leading anyone. He can't even lead himself, and that's a realization, of course, his mother is simply trying to ignore. And we found out, I guess, in this episode that she had another son who probably was groomed to be the person that she wants her son to be. But you know, this explains a lot of his behavior as well. He's always felt like his mother favored her brother, or his brother I should say, or like he's the backup son. That would definitely feed into a lot of his more indulgent behavior. It's not excusing it in any way, it's just more of an understanding of why he is the way that he is. And this happens a lot, unfortunately. Sometimes if you are a second child or a middle child or the surviving child, you're sometimes made to feel like you are the less desirable one, or like the one that died was more valuable to the family, and that can be a horrible place to be. I mean, I thankfully don't know what that feels like, but I've definitely heard and known people who have been even told sometimes by their parents that they wish that the other child had survived, and that's just a horrible thing. Like, I can't imagine anyone being that cruel, but it does happen, and sometimes people subconsciously put that kind of messaging out to the surviving child. So yeah, people don't always deal with that well, and in his case, Sebastian, he drank, he did drugs, he indulged, he basically did whatever he wanted because it was his way of, I guess, dealing with that grief. And again, it doesn't excuse it, but this happens, unfortunately. And again, in a world where you're privileged and you don't really have any consequences to your actions, you're kind of given the green light to continue that type of behavior. But it was at least good to see that Sebastian was self-aware enough to know that he was that person and that he didn't have any delusions of being a good guy or even the kind of person who should be taking up the office. And yeah, unfortunately, that's where things kind of went wrong with this deal, but we're going to get into that a little bit later. But yes, this deal happened, and we see that some of the Alexandrians have chosen to leave, like unsurprisingly Maggie. Well, we know that Hilltop no longer exists because they had to blow it up. So she'll be heading back to Alexandria after all these years, but hopefully it's going to be a little bit more of a happy situation for her because she didn't exactly leave on good terms, and she needs a place that's safe for her and Herschel, obviously. But we see that other people like Father Gabe seems to be a little bit torn. It seems like he might want to stay because he likes the fact that he has a congregation again. He's getting reminders of the life he had before, but it looks like our girl Rosita's like, nah, let's get my baby and get out of here. You know, we don't want to risk our child becoming collateral in this place. Plus, she didn't even want to become part of the military either. She kind of got forced into it because of her skills and also because she wanted her baby to not be living in the ghetto. But then we've got other people who want to really stay. Like, I think we saw that Jerry is kind of on the mindset of staying. You know, he's got 3 littles that are quite young and still not quite able to handle themselves out in the world. So understandable he wants to stay. Ezekiel saying that he wanted to stay because, again, he's kind of remembering his life before. You know, he's back to being a zookeeper in a way, and he's also helping out with his secret hospital, and he just feels like he's doing more with his life than just kind of sitting around, because, you know, Kingdom was really a huge thing for him, and he hasn't really ever, I think, dealt with how much losing that meant to him, and now I think he feels like he's getting that sense of purpose again. So even though Carol was like, like, come with us. You don't have to stay here. He was like, I think my place might be here because I feel like I'm needed. So we haven't seen Princess in a long time now that I think about it. I'm hoping the actress is okay. I did not read up to find out, but I just realized in these first 2 episodes, there's no sign of her. So again, I hope she's okay. And there's a reason why we haven't seen her. My guess, though, is that she'd want to stay with her boo thing, though. She's been on her own for the longest out of anyone in our group. And this is the first time she's been around people again for a while. So I wouldn't be surprised if her choice is to stay in the Commonwealth with her man. But anyway, I think the most notable person who wanted to stay was Judith. Understandable. Like I mentioned, the comparison between her and Lydia. Judith has spent her entire life basically on the road. Yes, she was in Alexandria, but by the time she was old enough to kind of, I guess, enjoy the comforts of being, behind some walls, things were already starting to go wrong in Alexandria. There had already had several issues. Plus she had Michonne as a mother, and Michonne was never someone to rest and just let things be. She taught Judith to be a little warrior from a very early age, which I think is a good thing. But, one could argue that it stole her childhood and she didn't get a chance to just be a young girl. And that's something she got to experience for the first time in the Commonwealth, sleeping without having to be looking over her shoulder, being able to go to school properly, having other kids her age, making friends, wearing girly clothes, all these things that she would have normally gotten a chance to experience, but never did because she was kind of always on alert. And so it's understandable. Lydia said a few episodes back that Maggie didn't really understand what it was like to live your whole life on edge, to never know peace just when you go to bed. That's something that she'd never known growing up. And when you get the chance to have it, it really is. Like she said, I just love the idea of waking up and knowing that every day is going to be the same. Like I want the chance to experience that. For the first time, Judith got to experience that. And I understand why she was loath to get rid of it and walk away from it so quickly. She wants to believe that there's a chance of her having, and again, we can't say old world because she was born in this world, but the idea of being able to grow up in a place where the most dramatic thing you have to deal with is what you're going to wear tomorrow, or, what boy likes you at school or something. Like that's a world that Judith very much deserves to live in. But yeah, I can see why she didn't want to run away from it. And Daryl's way of handling it, as I said in the episode, he had a point. But at the same time, the way he kind of just told Judith to stop was not exactly the way to handle it either. Judith's getting to an age now where you can't just tell her to do things. She has a mind, she can reason, and you have to start talking to her. You can't just make these unilateral decisions and not explain to her why they're happening. And so I like that Carol gave him a little pep talk and told him yeah, I know you weren't exactly planning on being a parent, especially like this, but you just gotta take it one day at a time. And, the big thing with someone like Judith, I think, is just communication. Like one thing we'll say about Michonne is that she never talked to Judith like she was a child. She always talked to her like she was an intelligent little human and reasoned with her. And she learned very early on that Judith's not the kind of girl who will just take whatever you say and go with it. She needs to understand why. So we saw that Daryl figured that out. They had a good convo, and she decided that going with Daryl was the best way because she needs to be with a caregiver of some kind. Plus she knows that there's anyone who's going to die for her, it's Daryl. And also, of course, RJ. They're a package deal. And as I said in the episode, if he does not bring those 2 children hale and healthy back to Michonne, he knows his neck is forfeit. So Michonne will cut that head off. Anyway, now going into the situation with Hornsby, he's taking his lumps, so to speak, but I knew he had a backup plan. And again, I feel like this is where, unsurprisingly, Carol seemed to underestimate him. Like maybe she didn't spend enough time to understand how deep his web goes. But again, we've only seen 2 of his people, so maybe it's not as deep as we thought, but 2 is enough apparently. But I think they underestimated Hornsby just going quietly into the night. And we see that Hornsby has a plan B in place. And he basically decided that if Pamela was going to cut him out, that he was going to show her that he was the one who controlled things. And if he can't live in the Commonwealth, well, nobody was going to live in the Commonwealth. So we saw that they set off some walker bombs and sent them into the crowds during one of the busiest times in their little Commonwealth town, knowing that there'd be many casualties, and obviously a lot of work for the military to clean that up. And I feel like this is not just to sabotage the Commonwealth, but also to create a big enough distraction to have him potentially broken out, because let's face it, if most of the military is busy trying to kill all the new walkers that are inside the walls, there's not going to be enough people to guard him or to watch whether or not he's still in his cell. So I very much expect to see or hear that Hornsby has made his way out of jail by the next episode. But beyond that, we see that he feels like the Miltons were not the family to mess with in this town, that they couldn't just be taken down, even though, Eugene was asking for any dirt on how to do that. But he brought up a very interesting point about the belief system and how the Commonwealth works. And that kind of feeds into what Sebastian was saying towards the end. And we see that Stephanie is just not okay with letting Sebastian take the reins, or even allowing Pamela to continue to take the reins now that she sees how corrupt. I mean, she's always known to an extent that they were corrupt, but now that she's seen the freedom fighting ways of Alexandria, she's like, I don't know if I can just sit back and let this happen anymore. And so she decided to take matters into her own hands and get the dirt herself, because she's seen Sebastian be absolutely awful more than once. And she records a conversation where he basically tells his truth about how the people of the Commonwealth don't want to know the truth. He says, like, they don't want to know what really happens. They don't want to know about who he really is. They don't want to know that the Miltons aren't perfect, because they want to believe that the old world still exists and that they can go back to it, and the same structures that existed in the old world. And again, we're talking about old American world in particular, the idea of the rich getting richer, the poor supporting the rich, capitalism at all costs. And of course, people being used, like he's like, that's still there. It's going to still be here. He's like, even my mother, like she says this lottery is so, random, but it's not. She decides who gets to come into this shiny new world while everybody else props up our little society. So yeah, he said they're all basically sheep. They don't want to know. And that's why he won't tell them the truth. And unfortunately, that is true. The older generation are definitely going to keep struggling with that, because they grew up in this world that was very different, whereas the younger generation, or those who chose to adapt to this new world, aka the Carols and the Daryls, etc., they know that this isn't a reality. This is not the way it can continue. Again, she decided to, Stephanie, expose this truth, and we see that it did not go over well. The people of the Commonwealth don't like being called stupid, but they also don't like to hear that their leader doesn't believe in this fake vision that they've got going on. And that's really what I think Hornsby was referring to, is that these people want to live in a fantasy world. Like, they want the Miltons to be this grand family. They want to believe that the old world can be brought back, and that's really what they're more upset about, not the Miltons themselves, but what they represent. And we see that, yes, they were taking it out on Pamela and the son, but really we would have seen inevitably would have come down to whoever exposed this truth, because really what these people want is a false sense of security. Really, they want to keep believing that everything's okay and that the ugliness outside is not happening. And that's true of our world today, but that's not the way it works. The world will eventually come crashing in. And that's what happened in this episode with these walker bombs that were set loose. The fact that most of the people in that place do not even know how to defend themselves against walkers is an atrocity. And we saw that, unfortunately, the reality check hitting all of the Alexandrias again, the ones that wanted to believe that maybe this place could be different. This reality check that nope, just in 1 second, in the blink of an eye, it could be right back to being like any other place. It could be overrun. It could be wiped out. And we saw that with Judith. I think that was one of the saddest parts of this episode, was that Judith really wanted to believe that this place could be different. And we saw her refusing her dad's gun earlier in the episode, and then later realizing that this is not something she can ever put down really in this world as it stands, because there's always going to be this imminent danger. And just the look on her face when she had to take it back and when she had to start killing walkers again, it's like Michonne, like if we remember back to like season, I think it was 6 or 7 in Walking Dead, and Michonne really wanted to hang up her sword inside of Alexandria and think she could live that life, and inevitably she had to take it off that mantle again. So very sad episode for her. And again, seeing her friend look at her and realize that, yeah, she's one of them outside girls. But I'm sure she's going to get over it pretty quickly since she's able to actually defend herself. And maybe her friend will, after she gets over her shock, realize that she should know how to defend herself too. But the last big thing of the episode, of course, is where we ended, where we have lost Sebastian. Sebastian was upset about his exposure by Stephanie, and he did what he normally does, which is a bitch move by trying to throw her into a walker, but karma came quick, and that same walker ended up taking him out. He saw that he was not able to defend himself, which again, how many times was he taken out by, what's his name, the head guard, trying to teach him how to do this, and he refused to learn? Well, life coming back to quite literally bite him. But I also think a part of Sebastian didn't necessarily want to survive, to be honest, because I think he's over it. He knew that he'd never be respected in that town ever. He knew his mother was never going to forgive him for screwing up again. And like I said, I think a part of him wasn't all that sad about dying, to be honest, even though he was screaming his head off. But we saw that basically all the townspeople stood back and watched him get bit. They could have saved him. There was enough people there to pull him free of it, but no one really wanted to. And so he met his own fate there. Pam has lost all her sons. The Milton legacy now ends with her, unless, of course, we've got Hornsby stepping up. So there's definitely going to be a power vacuum now. This leaves Pamela vulnerable in a lot of ways, and we saw that she was basically abandoned in all the chaos. And Hornsby, like I said, has set his own plans in motion. So the Commonwealth is definitely rickety right now. There's a lot of things that could go right or wrong here, and Rick's people are still in there. Negan's still in there. I didn't even talk about Negan, but yes, we see that he's battling with whether or not staying in the Commonwealth is the best thing now that they're about to have a newborn and they don't have a home. So we'll have to see what happens. I mean, this is the kind of thing that the old Negan would have jumped at as far as an opportunity to take over, but we'll have to see what happens. Lots of players, a lot of big players in Alexandria right now. And like I said, for the first time, the power structure there is on shaky legs. So we'll have to see how it goes as the season continues. This was a good episode. I hope you guys enjoyed watching with me, and I hope you like this commentary as well. If you did, please give this video a thumbs up, and we will see you in the next video.